Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media.
Hey, everybody, this is Andrew Gillum. And first, I want to give every one of you who took the time to listen to parts 1 and 2 of my testimony a big thank you for giving my voice an ear. This testimony is about basically what my life was and has been since the conclusion of the gubernatorial election in 2018. And a roller coaster would be one way to describe things. Everything from the aftermath of course, the race and what followed more immediately. The Miami incident that captured everybody's attention, imagination, and every gossiper, east, west, north, south. The indictment of myself and a colleague, and the trial, and then the conclusion of that trial. The first one, if you haven't heard it or would like to go back and refresh your memory, you'll find it at the end of our regular weekly cast. The episode is titled Miami Ain't No Sanctuary City. Part 2 will be at the end of the episode titled Faded None of These Candidates. And obviously part 3 right here, this MiniPod. I hope you learn, you get to listen, and that it piques your interest in getting more deeply involved in criminal justice reform. We walk into the courtroom. When the doors come open, I hear an audible gasp in the room. And I look around because I'm surveying, one, to make sure my family did not show up. They had snuck in there. But as I survey the room, there's journalists everywhere, journalists in the jury box, in the stand, there are people and whatnot. It is a real spectacle. But the gasp was that they noticed as I walked in that I was sort of hobbling in. And I think they were seeing that I was chained in this way. And my pastor, I see him sort of stand up and look over, and I see him start to say some words audibly, but I'm not sure what he's saying, but I'm pretty sure he was complaining about, well, why is he this way? And the only thought I had as I walked was, thank you, Jesus, there are no cameras. No one will ever see me this way. They can describe it, but my kids won't ever see these chains. It was the biggest source of embarrassment for me, because I remember back to that story of me telling you all that I never wanted to make my mom cry for me getting in trouble. That's all I could think of, was her seeing me. So they weren't there, and we go through the proceedings, and the judge says, this is the United States of America versus Andrew Gillum. Ever. An institution that I believed in like I believed in nothing else. A government that I was in service to for all of my life was now against me. And I didn't understand it for the life of me. And I heard, they didn't read the indictment out loud. I got a copy of it, and I couldn't read it until I got home. And as I read it, I didn't even see myself reflected in it. I didn't know what this garbage was that they decided to call charge. This was made up mess out of whole cloth. Fast forward, I'm glad to be validated by that fact, by the decision of the jury and everything that they have said since the case. But I will tell you, I hear those words will humble you to your knees, but to hear them as a working agent for them, a believer tried and true, a constitutionalist who made those words of the Declaration of Independence in every article of that Constitution at its founding apply to me, even though it wasn't written to include me. But I had always stood on the side of the promise of who we are and the fact that we should always be in the pursuit of the great for our country. The next several months were just pure hell, y'all. You know it. We all had check-ins at different times. I mean, I had chosen to focus exclusively on preparing myself for this trial upcoming. And I mean, I'm working I stop sleeping, I can't go through every day and whatnot, but to sit there and to hear these FBI agents, the undercover ones particularly, who I had gotten to know and befriend, there was something valuable to me in watching them on the stand as they were questioned, and they say, yeah, well, for 2 years we tried to get to know them. Our goal was to get close to him such that he would feel comfortable with us, and that when we, offered, the whatever, we know that he was comfortable enough that if his intention was to take it, he'd take it. Da 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 da. And they then start to describe me, and they say, we tried to get him to go to Vegas, but he said he couldn't. And then we tried to take him, skiing and da da da, but he said no. And then we said we would be here, and he said no. And then, we started coming more to Tallahassee and just doing the things he was doing. So we joined the gym, and we worked out with him, and then we did this. I mean, I had no reason not to believe that these guys weren't my friends. They kept saying they have interest in development of Southside, which is the black side of town. And I'm like, if you bring in money to invest in Southside, we're the place you want to be. I'm the mayor of this city. Maybe talk to you about that. And so I'm in full pitch mode. And over the course of our relationship, our friendship, and what clearly was not a friendship, but then they tell the jury and the lawyers in response to the question, we had to get to a place where we stopped trying to bring him places and then just figure out where he's going to be, and we'd be there too. So if he's on a work trip to New York or to DC, they'd have a reason to be there. And they used someone who was very close to me to learn my schedules and my goings. And so this big old Hamilton trip that everybody hears about, no one knows that they didn't fly me to New York. They didn't do it. I was going to be in New York for work. They just happened to want to hang out since we were all going to be there at the same time. They manufactured a whole situation because they needed to be around me. And then they talked about the art of mimicking, which is we start to get to know this guy well enough so we start to mimic the things that he's interested in. We reflect to him that we're interested in these things. So all this kind of thing. I needed to hear all of this, y'all, because I needed to know that I wasn't crazy. That I didn't walk into a bunch of terrible situations. These men gave me a real life example of what it felt like to be hunted. Unfortunately for them, my lawyer was able to get them to say, and after all you did, you read his emails, you went through his text messages, his voicemails, you all were on him for 8 years. Did Andrew Gillum perform as you would have expected an innocent elected official to have responded? Yes. Did he do everything that you would want a good public official to do by resisting? Did he ever take anything from you? No. Did he ever ask for it? No. And what they're very clear about is they expect me to do something for them in exchange for them giving me a campaign contribution. I reject it. I cut contact and have no other conversation with those fellas again until the government forces me to have a conversation through this. Again, in the spirit of being hunted, I come to realize that now they're investigating my campaign for governor because a black man can't raise 50+ million and be not on the take. And they come up with a whole story around me extorting and setting up ways to pay myself for this, that, and the other. Unbelievable stuff. It was the most disastrous and disgusting set of lies I'd ever have to listen to, y'all. But the worst of the lies that I had to listen to were the FBI investigators who sat there, put my children's name of their school where they attended, to put their social security numbers projected in a courtroom without the care to take them out, to black them out, to put my wife's most intimate whatever in communications and exchanges and everything else up there with no care for us as humans, as people, to say that I was living beyond my means because I was sending 3 kids to private school. While I was a public official, by the way, a total and complete lie. My children were all of daycare age during this period, and the money that we were paying was their school tuition. But I'm sending my kids to private school, and you told this jury that I was living beyond my means because I was paying a church dues, some membership dues to a church. Not one piece of evidence did they enter into this trial to support their claim. It was completely and wholly the story that they made up and told themselves without the ability to prove it before a court of law. But they could disparage me. They could embarrass us. They could throw us out there like we didn't even matter as humans. But nobody has ever written about what was the genesis of this FBI investigation. When did you all decide to send FBI undercover agents to get on Gillum? What actions had he taken prior to this that would suggest that he would be susceptible to a bribery charge or anything? What's foundationally there that got y'all here? No one has written this story about the FBI agent in charge of this investigation. Where did he work before he came to the FBI? Would it surprise anybody to learn that he worked for the father of one of my opponents? A former United States Senator who was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee of the United States government, the committee that is responsible for the most clandestine operations of this country, but also to include the FBI. That the person worked for the father of someone who I was running against for governor. This story's not been written. Did anybody get a tip that Andrew had taken a bribe from anybody in Tallahassee before? Had ever even been thought to have done so? None of that existed. But yet, in 2016, I became the guy of interest. One woman, white, older woman who owns a salon, married to a white male attorney, who lives in a very conservative county, who we would later learn had on her social media prior to her being selected on the jury, Trump is still my president, that she got into the jury box, immediately pushed back from the table, jury room, pushed back from the table and says, I don't have anything to deliberate. He's been guilty before, he's guilty now, and all of it. And thankfully, one of the jurors was able to very skillfully bring her around to at least voting on one, lying to the FBI, and they were able to get unanimous agreement after many days of work on that one juror to try to get her to see the reason here. He says, where's the, what did he do? What did he say? Tell me the lie. Because everything we've looked at is the truth. Can you tell me where the lie is? She can't tell the lie because the lie didn't exist. I never lied to the FBI, despite of their continuous targeting and lying to me. So they got her on that one. But she would not make any other decision on any other counts because I was already guilty. Well, they worked for a week in that room, and I was about to lose every hope I had because it had been such a rough time. But I knew somebody was back there fighting for right. And prior to going in, my attorneys and myself and RJ, and I invited my pastor in, and they wanted to prepare me. They wanted to talk to me about my decorum and what was going to happen when I went in. My big question was, are they going to take me today or will I see my kids? And he said, well, they're going to take you if you're found guilty on any count. And he says, so I want to prepare you because we think that's how it may go. And I want you to be ready. And RJ, I want you to be ready. And RJ looked at him and she said, I think you're wrong. I think he's not guilty on all of them. And I think that's what was taking so long. And I looked at this woman like, I don't want you to be deluded because that will hurt a lot if we leave this room and you're not ready for that possibility. I don't want that. So I told myself to gird up and just be ready for that verdict so I don't have a reaction. And just as we are finishing up the prayer, right, we believe in God and we submit this to you and we know you got it. I want to admit in that prayer that I was not all the way honest because I wasn't convinced and I hadn't left it in his hands until RJ grabbed my hand and held it in clutch as we exited our conference room. And I got chills over my body and something came into my spirit that said, I don't know how God's going to do it, but he is going to work this out. And I took my seat. And when the judge comes in and he asks them if they had reached the verdict and they say yes on one and not on any of the others, because we got this holdout over here, I stand. This is the piece I've seen on television 1,000 times, so I know that everybody stands up. And they ask the jury on the verdict, what had they decided? And I stood and I faced the jury. And the four persons said, we've unanimously agreed that he is not guilty on count one, lying to the government. And this is the one my lawyer told me to be prepared for. And I couldn't respond emotionally because I wasn't sure exactly what was supposed to happen, but I heard my wife and my aunts gasp and their thank you, Jesus, and their praise. And it just came undone for me because I was overwhelmed. But I have to tell y'all, after that day, I started to decline into this space where anger took over every part of me. I was so mad. I couldn't take calls of congratulations from all the places they were coming from because I didn't want to answer the phone and sound ungrateful for what God had given me. After the indictment, my local bank that I banked with since I was 23, who underwrote the cost of my home, I got my first home loan through, sent me a letter after I was indicted telling me that after a random review of conditions of our membership, we've decided you don't meet them and you've got 30 days to close all your accounts. People who I have been there for without ever being asked, who disappeared. I'm thankful for God helping to remove those things from my life that I could not. I'm thankful for the solid rocks of friends who are not fair weather, but all weather friends. I'm thankful to a loving family who reminded me every single day that they loved me and that this was all part of God's plan. I know it is in purpose to something greater. The enemy never attacks a thing that isn't a threat. And when it does attack a threat, it attacks it in proportionality. And if you had to produce a document that said the United States of America via Andrew Gillum and his co-defendant, then I must be some hell of a threat. That through the full force of the government, their lies, their disgusting lies, the ruin and wreckage that they left behind and didn't so much as apologize for. You tried to kill me, put me in the ground. You missed. And I hope that part of the plan that God has for my life is the leveling of governmental institutions that abuse their power to go after who they have determined to be their enemies. There is real racism in the system, y'all. There's real stuff that has to be dismantled about this thing. And I can't wait to be about that work even more. If you are a federal prosecutor and you go to a grand jury and you lie to them to get an indictment, you should be held accountable for having lied. If you're the federal government and you bring suit on an individual and you lose, you should have to pay the $1 million that I still owe in attorney's fees. You do it in civil cases. If someone brings a frivolous lawsuit, they get their money. Not here. So you leave me in wreckage and then you don't have the decency to apologize. The system has got to be leveled and changed, because while I have a microphone and I can talk about what my experience is, there are people who are voiceless and nameless. We can't call them today, who have seen far worse. They're sitting in prisons not because they're guilty, but because they couldn't afford a defense. They're not there under indictment because they did something wrong, but because somebody had determined that they needed to be taken off the playing field. If a government can do that to you, and we know it can, then we got to be courageous enough to stand right back up against them and level the systems that were designed to do exactly what they do. First and foremost, I want to live for my wife and for my children. But if God puts breath in my body, I'm committed to doing His work, His way, for the rest of my life, because I believe that I was put on this earth for a reason. And I don't know all the reasons yet, but it certainly wasn't to leave me desolate, poor, in despair, and locked up somewhere. He didn't do this for that. I know that much. So I believe what He says about me and not what they say about me. Thank y'all.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.